everyone, welcome back to their hardware news recap of the week. In this one, NVIDIA, still vibe coding. They launched a driver and then they retracted it. It's like a repeat of last year at the same time. This time it was because sometimes the new driver made it so that the fans don't spin. Great. Perfect fit for something that pulls around 600 watts and uses a 12-volt high power connector. I'm sure that'll go great. Also, RAM and SSD prices to see potentially another 130% increase throughout 2026. Lenovo has its new Legion Go device with a rollable screen. It's kind of interesting. And then there's also some pretty heavy news this week talking about things like Amazon AWS outages connected with the events, the conflict going on with the UAE, Iran, US, Israel strike on it and affecting AWS data centers, plus OpenAI's commitment, alignment with the Department of Defense, or as Altman calls it, the Department of War, which he says they deserve empathy or something. So we'll talk about all those. Let's get into it. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly and their new Duronaut thermal paste. Thermal Grizzly claims its Duronaut paste is intended for long-term stability and endurance, focusing on paste longevity in addition to the usual performance focus. Thermal Grizzly's Duronaut paste comes with applicators and spreaders, and ships in numerous tube sizes, aiming to provide a high-end paste for PC builds and daily driven overclocks by enthusiasts. Learn more at the link in the description below. All right, really quick GN update. So our Sega story is live. This is where we investigated a series of events where Sega coordinated with the City of London police to seize game development kits, cartridges, consoles from both Sega and its partners like Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. It's a really fascinating story. We went and spoke to a lot of people for it, all the way up the chain. I spoke to the guy who was arrested. We spoke to the guys who worked at the scrapyard and kind of knew the details of this. It's fascinating. It's honestly, in terms of the editing and how we kind of linked it all together, wove the story together, because it's really complicated and difficult to compress into even an hour, but we managed to do that. And I think it's probably the sort of proudest I am of a special feature that's that length. I mean, we packed a lot in there. It's really fun. And honestly, the thing that I like the most is because of the community support we had from the funding on the store, store.gamersnexus.net, if you want to chip in, we were able to hire out a lot of the music to be fully custom. So we still had some usual, like, pull some tracks from Premium Beat or whatever, where you pay a license for the track. But I also hired a lot of it out. So Aaron Pauley from Of Mice and Men contributed a lot of the tracks. And one thing I wanted to mention that I didn't get into in that video is that he actually went and researched the difference between the music chips on the early Sega devices versus the early Nintendo devices. And he learned how they work, and in one quote to me, he said that the early Sega composers were galaxy-brained because of how complicated it was. Something about FM synth or frequency modulation synthesizers and how they made the music. It's like dozens of knobs in the software. And he went and learned how they did that. And then he did that as best he could on a pretty tight timeline to turn around some awesome music for the documentary, the report we put together. That is era appropriate. So he did some NES style tracks, he did some Sega style tracks from the same era, and it's sick. It's really, the music is really cool in that one. So if for no other reason, you should check it out for that, because an actual artist, like an actual musician, tracked it for us, where I was sending him clips and he would make the track and send it back, and it's fucking cool. So anyway, check that out. I just wanted to say that. And if you did want to support for the next one, you can go to store.gamersnexus.net and grab something you think is cool. We have a lot of stuff like this YouTube copyright strike t-shirt. So, all right, let's get into the first stories. Up next, Microsoft has locked down its official Discord Copilot server. This is something we've confirmed firsthand on the actual Microsoft Discord server for Copilot because a user posted the word Microslop. The word is banned because it's inappropriate. And as you can imagine, this led to lots of users doing variations on Microslop on the official Microslop Discord server for Copilot. Microsoft CEO previously expressed exhaustion at people referring to AI-generated content as, quote, slop, end quote, previously stating, quote, we need to get beyond the arguments of slop versus sophistication, end quote, before writing a bunch of good old-fashioned corpo slop about equilibrium for theory of mind and cognitive amplifier tools. This is really the guy I want at the helm to table that for now and put a pin in it so we can circle back on it later offline. A user posted to ask if, quote, Microslop is blocked, end quote, on the server for Copilot, which is the reject of the AI family of chatbots. The user was met with a message that reads, quote, this content is blocked by the server. From server moderators, your message contained phrase that is inappropriate, end quote. Windows Latest has a video embed showing the interaction in real time. Windows Latest noted that after its initial post about Microslop being blocked, internet users did what internet users do and flooded the server with variations on the spelling. Microslop then locked its server, something GN has confirmed. We attempted to join the server to verify the story about shitposting about Microslop on our very own, but we were not allowed to join. And I only have one thing to say about Microslop blocking my access to join their Discord server.
Fuck Microsoft!
Okay. Fuck! For a company named Microsoft, they sure are sensitive about names. But anyway, I insist that at this point we only refer to them as Microslop because it is obviously bothering them and they've earned it. Up next, a 390 terabyte online public archive of video games will be shutting down on March 31st this year, citing rising memory and storage costs as contributing to increased web hosting fees for their servers. Normal servers, the old school kind that you put stuff on, not AI inference servers. The Myriad Archive is a part of the Arista group that focuses on video game preservation with its stated mission as making, quote, video game content available without normal means of monetization, end quote. If that sounds like piracy, it isn't necessarily. The archives largely contain older games that have no possibility of being purchased today, at least in the form of media they're archived in, other than used media, including some that have already been preserved by archive.org through legal avenues. For example, archive.org has well-established legal precedent and preserves games like the Need for Speed Underground 2 demo, Trackmania Nations Forever, Pharaoh, and even Lemmings, which released for MS-DOS in 1991 and is still a great game today if you haven't tried it. As for Myriad, the archive contains everything from the TI-86 graphing calculator, including a firmware and a games folder we found, to cabinet arcade games that have long left public accessibility, like Time Crisis. There are contemporary games saved as well, though, which likely could have posed a DMCA risk at some point or throughout its history at varying points. We found, for example, Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which was released somehow 13 years ago in the Xbox 360 folder. Myriad will be shutting down due to rising costs and insufficient funding. The owner's Telegram post reads, quote, as traffic continued to increase last year, the amount of funding from donations remained the same. I've been paying more than $6,000 out of pocket every month in order to cover the difference, which is not sustainable, end quote. The author goes on to describe how download managers have been profiting off of his maintenance work by using the archive for commercial, for-profit purposes, which the author forbids, especially seeing as he doesn't make a profit himself. The owner also states this as a reason for shutting down, quote, rising RAM, SSD, and HDD prices. Since last September, RAM, SSDs, and HDDs have surged dramatically and continue to rise due to the ongoing extreme demand for AI data centers. This has caused Myriad's hosting expenses to go up as well. Necessary upgrades to the storage and caching infrastructure only exacerbated the problem. With the large number of servers and the aforementioned existing monthly deficit in excess of $6,000 out of pocket, there is no way to pay for the increased hosting and hardware upgrade costs, end quote. Standard hosting providers and web servers are increasing costs as a result of the data center demand, just like everyone else. The author concludes with saying, quote, in short, I can no longer afford to run the site, end quote. The owner states that the site will continue operating until March 31st. The archive remains available, and data hoarders are downloading it, but it's moving slowly right now because of that. The FAQ states that the data archive is explicitly an ad-free service, much like our own GN website. The archive aims to, quote, focus on accessibility with fast downloads, end quote, without limits, and the owner checks hashes of file lists against the known good copies for safety. The site writes that its name, quote, refers to the countless amount of video game content that is difficult to access or no longer available legitimately, end quote. And that's the key there, maintaining access when other means of access, like buying it, would be cut off. The FAQ page goes on to describe the archives. So if you're struggling to understand how to navigate them because It is confusing if you're not familiar with the terminology. You should start on the FAQ page to learn. The point is that, like the Video Game Preservation Museum that we visited in England in our recent investigation into Sega that you should check out on the channel, this is a game archive that's intended to preserve memories as media becomes unavailable. This page, dedicated to the Apple II, Atari 2600, Commodore, NES, and even the Leapfrog, isn't going to hurt any of these companies. They don't sell these games today. Some of them don't even exist anymore, especially if you look at Atari and through the nested web of ways it has changed hands. And I mean, look, it's done crypto and gambling and hotels, and it's not really the same Atari as the 2600 anymore. Data rot on disks you actually own, arcades dying, and game services being taken offline are some of the many reasons that you might not be able to fulfill an instant need to satisfy a nostalgia hit for a game that you loved that is otherwise now gone from your collection, or otherwise basically impossible to get a hold of, or in some cases, even play without significant effort to get it adapted and compatible with modern systems, such as, for example, having to go out and try and figure out how to get old hardware to output signal to more modern display devices if you don't have an older TV that is capable of accepting the signal as it was originally intended to be sent. And so there's a lot of reasons to preserve games. I don't have to explain that to this audience, fortunately, but game preservation keeps this stuff available in good faith. And that's something that we're supportive of. Unfortunately, this 390 terabyte archive is going to go away, although it is being backed up by the community, so hopefully someone will carry it on. But we're sad to see that such an impressive collection of history and nostalgia is a casualty of the DRAM pricing crisis and the AI data center demand. Companies like OpenAI are causing this with its reservation of 40% of the wafer supply for DRAM into the next several years so that they can buy the memory that's often made and put it into their servers they haven't built, into the data centers that aren't constructed or even approved or permitted in some cases for the service that now everyone is canceling. So anyway, sad news for this game archive. Unfortunately, at least as far as I can remember, I think this is the first time I've personally ever heard of it. And I was going through the catalog and I was like, damn, this is really impressive, the stuff that's in here. Like, there's a lot of games that I've played. And I mean, like Lemmings, for example, which I think I probably have on a floppy disk somewhere, but I'm not sure. And I can tell it'd be a whole lot easier. I own it legitimately. Like, it is it has been paid for, but it'd be a hell of a lot easier to just download it from the archive. I mean, look, I don't think they're going to be offended at this point for that one, all right? It was a while ago, and it was paid for, and that money back then was worth a lot more at that time than it is now. Anyway, up next, memory and SSD prices are still rising, and now it's really starting to affect the low end, really to no one's surprise in this space. We already kind of knew that in the audience, but after what has already been a 4 to 5x increase in DRAM prices since October, a new Gartner forecast suggests that an additional 130% DRAM and SSD price hike is inbound for 2026. Gartner wrote, quote, soaring memory costs are projected to drive worldwide PC shipments to decline 10.4% and smartphone shipments to drop by 8.4% in 2026 compared to 2025 levels. Gartner estimates a 130% surge in combined DRAM and solid-state drive prices by the end of 2026, which will increase PC prices by 17% and smartphone prices by 13% compared to 2025 levels. The situation will concentrate demand on premium prices. They continued and said, quote, this is the steepest contraction in device shipments witnessed in over a decade. Higher prices will narrow the range of devices available, prompting buyers to hold on to devices for longer, fundamentally altering upgrade cycles, end quote. Gartner also wrote, somewhat comically for those of us who live in this reality daily, that, quote, the sub-$500 entry-level PC segment will disappear by 2028, end quote. Not wrong, it also will disappear by 2027. And it will disappear by 2026. And it will have disappeared by 2025. Somewhere around or before that range, it already disappeared. To be fair, they're not talking about like the sub-$500 gaming segment. That's been dead for a while, at least if you want a DGPU, even with an APU these days and an IGP, well, especially these days. But even talking about desktop PCs, like a living room computer or something that a family uses for web browsing or doing resumes or whatever, things that aren't gaming or workstation use, even that has already been dead for a while. But okay, sure, definitely by 2028, got it. More importantly, though, we see the expected people affected here the most, which is as usual, people who are already hurting the most, being affected the most by the pricing situation. Quote, Gartner analysts expect basic smartphone buyers to exit the market 5 times faster than premium buyers in 2026, end quote. Those who already struggle to afford phones and computers will be the most disproportionately impacted by this, which is just kind of how it always works. It seems like. Up next, we already know how NVIDIA feels about vibe coding.
You know, one of my favorite things is just vibe coding. Anybody could be a software programmer now. And vibe coding is creating software that, you know, is better than a lot of software programmers, just because you feel the vibe. And the vibe came from a combination of data, analysis, first principle, life experience, wisdom, sensing other people. That vibe, I think that's smart.
And now the vibes have come home to roost. Is that what vibes do? In early 2025, NVIDIA was plagued with driver issues. We reported on crashes, black screens, flickering, monitor compatibility issues, performance issues, and corruption, but not the usual kind with governments and AI companies. Now, the vibe code strikes back again. NVIDIA launched driver version 595.59 this past week, then quickly retracted it. Among other issues, users and computer base reported that the new driver package resulted in fan control failures that prevented fans from spinning up or halted them from spinning. NVIDIA's proud announcement of its game-ready drivers went up with the launch of Resident Evil Requiem, immediately followed by this February 26th update. February 26th, 11 a.m. update. We have discovered a bug in the Game Ready and Studio 59559 WCL drivers and have removed the downloads temporarily while our team investigates. For users who have already installed this driver and are experiencing issues with fan control, please roll back to 591.86 WCL. NVIDIA app users can reinstall their previous driver by clicking the 3 dots in the drivers tab, end quote. On March 2nd, NVIDIA updated again, quote, we have resolved the aforementioned issues and released a new version of the Resident Evil Requiem Game Ready driver, which you can download from the NVIDIA app or GeForce Now, end quote. This does, however, follow a year of NVIDIA's worst drivers that I personally have ever tested or used in decades now. They've been real bad the last year. AMD actually might have more stable drivers right now, which is completely insane to say. And if I had said that 5 years ago, you would tell me that I should check myself into an asylum. But that is actually where we're at right now, where AMD's drivers looking actually kind of okay compared to whatever it is NVIDIA is doing on the other side of their fence. This isn't really a better topic, but let's move on to something related to OpenAI, since we're talking about the destruction of consumer affordability, so that we can instead focus on what matters to OpenAI now, which is the destruction of people. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman posted to Twitter that the company is now partnering with the Department of Defense, and he's called for empathy for the, as he writes it, Department of War. OpenAI intends to integrate into the military-industrial complex with ChatGPT, and this comes one day after OpenAI President Greg Brockman, one of Trump's largest donors at over $25 million now, tweeted that OpenAI would be working towards, quote, AGI that benefits all of humanity, end quote. Less than a day before the strikes against Iran, Sam Altman gleefully boasted OpenAI's partnership with the U.S. Department of Defense. Quote, tonight, we reached an agreement with the Department of War to deploy our models in their classified network, end quote. And so before we even get into the worst parts of this, on the consumer side, if you've been having trouble with affordability of hardware because these companies are all in bed with each other and selling to each other, good news, now the government's in there too. I mean, more than they were before. And so now there's more competition for consumer parts because there's going to be more demand. Look, I did ask ChatGPT, I mean that, I'm serious, if it would be more efficient to fly an A-10 Warthog to a strafing run that's 100 meters away. Yes, I know it's a close target, all right, but I asked if it would be more efficient to fly it 100 meters away for the strafing run I need to do, or if it would be more efficient to walk there. And it did say it would be faster to walk there because of the startup time, and before I'd even be finished with the pre-flight checklist, I could have just walked to the strafing run target. So not sure it's going to be the best for these applications, but let's continue. Quote, in all our interactions, the DOW displayed a deep respect for safety and a desire to partner to achieve the best possible outcome, end quote. Less than a day after tweeting about the so-called Department of War's respect for safety, a joint US-Israel strike hit civilian infrastructure, including a strike that killed at least 153 at a civilian girls' school. Altman continues, quote, AI safety and wide distribution of benefits are the core of our mission. Two of our most important safety principles are prohibitions on domestic mass surveillance and human responsibility for the use of force, including for autonomous weapon systems, end quote. About 2 days after tweeting about responsible use of autonomous weapon systems, a Kuwaiti air defense system accidentally shot down 3 U.S. F-15 fighter jets, though the crew reportedly made it down safely. Altman is starting to look like the Jim Cramer of the DoD. He continues, quote, the DOW agrees with these principles, reflects them in law and policy, and we put them into our agreement. We also will build technical safeguards to ensure our models behave as they should, which the DOW also wanted. We will deploy FDEs to help with our models and to ensure their safety. We will deploy on cloud networks only. Oh, great. Continues, we are asking the DOW to offer these same terms to all AI companies, which, in our opinion, we think everyone should be willing to accept. End quote on that. Look, I can't speak on behalf of the AI companies, but I would like to for just a moment. Fuck you. Sam Altman has absolutely no ability to speak on behalf of what the other AI companies should accept. Like, this is, even just as a consumer, this is bad. Companies should not be colluding with each other and the government because it leads to non-competition and antitrust issues like you see in the DRAM market for decades now. So first of all, fuck off. And secondly, fuck off anyway. Quote, we have expressed our strong desire to see things de-escalate away from legal and governmental actions and towards reasonable agreements. We remain committed to serve all of humanity as best we can. The world is a complicated, messy, and sometimes dangerous place, end quote, says Sam Altman. This platitude, as you'd expect, invited a flood of comments. Altman spent his Saturday defensively replying to many of the tweets. Great use for someone conducting a company that's trying to do trillions of dollars of spend. But anyway, for example, he replied to one user, and I want to be very clear, this is a direct quote from Sam Altman. These are his words. Where he said that one tweet, quote, said something about sucking the DOW's dick too hard to be able to say anything critical, end quote. Yes, this is what the CEO of OpenAI is doing on Saturday, so that's good. Altman launched a Twitter AMA after this because apparently he wanted more. In one response, Altman replied to a user asking if OpenAI had been threatened by the government, stating that the DoD, which he unironically calls the DOW, did not make any, quote, explicit or implicit threats, end quote. Altman also stated in a separate reply that OpenAI, quote, rushed, end quote, in an attempt, quote, to de-escalate the situation, end quote, before then saying, quote, I know what it's like to feel backed into a corner, and I think it's worth some empathy to the Department of War, end quote. That's right. You should always feel empathy for mega corporations and government agencies, especially ones called Department of War. Really feel for them. Altman then went on to say such bold things as, quote, I do not believe unelected leaders of private companies should have as much power as our democratically elected government, end quote, which we assume he said is because he thinks actually they should have more power than an elected government, seeing as OpenAI President Greg Dollar Store Jensen Juan Brockman gave $12.5 million in one swoop to the MAGA Inc. Super PAC as one of its top donors, and in total appears to have given at least $25 million to the Super PAC that directly exchanges tens of millions of dollars with the Save America PAC that Donald Trump owns. If you haven't been following the news, OpenAI's alignment with the DoD follows Trump, tweeting the following about Altman's competitor Anthropic and its Claude chatbot. And just to draw the straight line for you, this relates back to when Altman was asked if he felt any implicit or explicit threats from the government to partner with them. And also one more note, I am going to read this verbatim, and I am going to read the all caps sections as they are intended. So prepare your volume knob. Quote, the left-wing nut jobs at Anthropic have made a disastrous mistake trying to strong-arm the Department of War and force them to obey their terms of service instead of our Constitution, end quote. He continued, quote, I am directing every federal agency in the United States government to immediately cease all use of Anthropic's technology. We don't need it, we don't want it, and will not do business with them again, end quote. Someone get D. Snyder on the line for that last line. That's a real twisted sister one there. We don't need it, we don't want it. Maybe Altman wasn't standing close enough to Hegseth to smell the threat directly, but this kind of tweet would be threatening to read, even indirectly, and about a competitor. As a separate note, a Wall Street Journal story reported that Anthropic's technology was, ironically, used within hours of the royal decree to ban Anthropic. We guess that's the, quote, phase-out period, end quote, that Trump mentioned. At this point, ChatGPT subscriptions have been canceled en masse by users as a result of all of this, voting with their wallets, sort of like OpenAI's Greg Brockman and Sam Altman vote with their wallets when they give tens of millions of dollars to literally any administration. It's a problem. I don't care which party it is. It is a problem to give tens of millions of dollars to a government to then get favorable policies and contracts in some quid pro quo. But the users are voting with their wallets just like these companies do. And so there's maybe some poetry in a Hammurabi's Code-esque way here. I guess instead of eye for an eye, though, it's wallet for a wallet. Something that the executives understand better. A post on the ChatGPT subreddit garnered 31,000 upvotes and 2,300 comments in about a day. The post says, quote, you're now training a war machine. Let's see proof of cancellation, end quote. In the comments, hundreds of users post screenshots of canceling ChatGPT subscriptions. Some noted being offered a free month or other discounts on the way out. Anthropic's Claude has climbed to the #1 Apple App Store spot, following its public spat with the Pentagon, wherein it refused to back down on its own ethics guidelines, and following the GPT exodus. Now, whatever the reason is for people abandoning OpenAI, whether that's because of a moral dilemma with their support of the military-industrial complex, or because fuck OpenAI, seriously, as long as people are abandoning it, that's good by me. Because OpenAI has been centrally involved in this circle of funding and financing where these companies all pass $100 back and forth to each other and reserve millions of GPUs and RAM and now SSDs. Actually, motherboards and power supplies are being affected as well. And it's not about give the gamers their parts entitlement. It's about you're competing with mega corporations who, as we've been saying for months now, I know you're getting sick of it, but this is important that everyone understands this. It is so that they can lease this shit back to you later. Whether or not that's how they market it. That is the end game here. It is clear as day to me. Anyway, this is a weak moment for OpenAI, and it is at risk. And most of its revenue, as little as it is, comes from end users. And OpenAI is overcommitted to the tune of over $1 trillion of spend commitments it has made with revenue that, as a non-economist, I'm not a business finance guy, but I don't see how they could pay for it. I think it's physically impossible right now. And if people really want to kill this company, it sure seems now would be the moment. I think the only question is whether the U.S. government steps in to bail it out, because now they are part of the military-industrial complex directly. And, I mean, they may get support there. So one way or the other, whether it's a taxpayer-funded bailout or it's a subscription, a lot of people are still going to be paying for OpenAI. All right, up next, in the more serious news relating to the OpenAI, U.S., Iran stuff that we've been talking, Department of Defense we've been talking about, in another blend of tech and world news, and sorry to bring it to you, but Amazon AWS had a server outage due to a data center being hit with, I think they said it was impacted by objects that struck the data center. That's the quote from a data center in the UAE. Just as an update here that we're recording during editing, but Amazon did later confirm that these were the result or directly related to drone strikes. We'll get to that in a second. So this follows the joint U.S.-Israel strike and the responses to that from Iran. Via Data Center Dynamics, Amazon wrote in an update that some AWS zones went down after the UAE data center, quote, was impacted by objects that struck the data center, end quote, which again is one hell of a passive statement. It was anything other than a weather balloon. Amazon AWS further stated, quote, the fire department shut off power to the facility and generators as they worked to put out the fire. We're still awaiting permission to turn the power back on. And once we have, we will ensure we restore power and connectivity safely. It will take several hours to restore connectivity to the impacted zone. The other zones in the region are functioning normally. With 2 availability zones significantly impacted, customers are seeing high failure rates for data ingest and egress. We strongly advise customers to update their applications to ingest S3 data to an alternate AWS region. As soon as practically possible, we will begin the restoration of our 2 availability zones, which will include a careful assessment of data health and any repair of storage if necessary, end quote. The company did not directly reference the military action in the region, instead simply attributing the outage to, again, quote, objects that, quote, hit, end quote, the data center and caused a fire. Now, the time between filming and editing, Amazon did put out an update and has confirmed that these were drone strikes, or potentially the result of drone strikes and that debris hitting the data centers. Amazon said, quote, in the UAE, 2 of our facilities were directly struck. While in Bahrain, a drone strike in close proximity to one of our facilities caused physical impacts to our infrastructure. These strikes have caused structural damage, disrupted power delivery to our infrastructure, and in some cases required fire suppression activities that resulted in additional water damage, end quote. That was the most recent information as of the time of writing this. There's a chance there's some new information out there by the time we publish, in which case I'll pin a comment, put it at the top if something develops in that time. But if nothing else, this is a good reminder that the communications infrastructure we have between everybody on Earth at this point is very fragile, where there's just a couple of really key underwater internet lines. Obviously, you got satellites too these days, but those do a lot of heavy lifting, and those are vulnerable infrastructure. Data centers are vulnerable infrastructure, especially with how consolidated and monopolized that is for things such as web hosting, application hosting, stuff like that, where this will only get worse as more software and more hardware ownership moves away from things that you can do locally in front of you without anything external, and you have to go through things like validation servers to just even make sure your subscription is active so that you can use your computer. So this situation, there's greater issues at hand, obviously. It serves as a key reminder, though, of just another reason why sucking all this stuff into software as a service, hardware as a service, and billing for it ad infinitum is a risk beyond just consumer harm. So anyway, let's move on to something lighter than war for our last topic. We previously reviewed Lenovo's Legion Go in the handheld category of gaming devices, and now they have a new model in the works. Lenovo debuted a 7.7-inch POLED Legion Go. Should we call it POLED? Polled? You can sound off in the comments. We'll switch for now to trigger everybody. This includes the ability to expand to 11.6 inches via the rollable screen technology. Tom's Hardware lists the device as using an Ultra 7258V Intel CPU with ARC 140V IGP and 32 gigabytes of LPDDR5X, which is going to be very expensive for memory, considering the heavy use in the AI servers from NVIDIA that we just mentioned. The rollable screen Legion Go has controller mounts flanking all 4 sides, according to Tom's Hardware, meaning that the classic detachable Legion Go controller style, similar in concept to our original review of it, different device though, could be mounted on 2 additional sides for an alternate orientation. The left controller has 4 various settings buttons, a D-pad, and an analog stick. The right controller has 2 settings buttons, a scroll wheel, standard 4 face buttons, analog stick, and a circular LCD. In the Tom's Hardware photo from Lenovo's unveil, the screen simply shows a clock. The backside has the usual bumpers, triggers, and 2 grip buttons. That's it for news this week. It's a heavy week. It was a heavy week last week too, but for different reasons. I mean, last time it was just talking about the tariffs decision. That's not nearly as heavy as the stuff we're looking at today. I guess I'll leave you with just kind of a personal note for myself. I haven't written anything for this, but just thinking out loud, really. This stuff, I know it's the most fun to get an escape from a lot of this news by looking at literally only hardware. Things like this Legion Go thing that we just mentioned. And I also would love to only talk about that. It's just that we're at a point where there's this intersection of the technology companies and greater global events, whether it's war or other things, that they're kind of inseparable now. And to not talk about some of this stuff, I think it's worse to not say anything. And as someone in our position where we share information with the public, to shove our heads in the sand and just decide this isn't happening and talk about only fun things like NVIDIA fucking up its drivers repeatedly and playing video games and whatever Newegg has done to screw someone over this week. That's all important stuff too. It's just that right now there's so much of a blend between these greater world events and the tech companies where, one way or another, let's take data centers as an example. We can't ignore data centers and data center policy and how governments interact with data centers and AI companies where they're all in bed with each other. We can't ignore it and just talk about only hardware and only computer parts, because there's not going to be any fucking computer parts or any building computers the way they're going. So that's kind of my view on it, where it's like I need to talk about this stuff, and I feel like it's important. And we have some unique insights to the technical side that a lot of the mainstream coverage would be lacking, and we can blend those things pretty well. And again, likewise, even just looking past these greater world events we're talking about this week, unfortunately, and looking only at the consumer side, there's not going to be a consumer side if normal people can't afford computers. And I've said this in a past episode, but if the only people who can afford to build computers and watch reviews about a computer case are the ones who can afford $2,000 for a kit of memory, then the service I would be providing is only to the wealthy. And at that point, I really might as well just contract for them directly, and it's not what we do. So it's not to say we don't talk about computer parts like we did in this one, the Legion Go, or like we'll do in reviews throughout the week. And another we just posted that Yeston review of the 9070 GRE, which I don't think I'd really seen any major reviews of until now. It's not that we won't do it. It's just that there's a lot of bigger issues that I personally feel like I need to talk about because it's normal people who get fucked the absolute most here, just like we saw in that Gartner report in this week's roundup, where they're talking about how the people who buy basic phones exit the market first. Those are the people whose phones will most likely die and won't survive the lengthened upgrade cycle, unlike the premium buyers who can not only afford them more frequently, but probably that phone's better and will last a little longer, like buying a flagship 1080 Ti versus a 1060 or something. And so if you see that scenario all the way through to its natural conclusion, someone who can only buy a basic phone is on a lengthier upgrade cycle, phone dies unexpectedly, they drop it, whatever. They might not have the funds to just go spend $200 on what today would be considered a low-end phone. And so then now you end up renting your phone from AT&T. You lease it, basically. And then you trade it back and you get sucked into this cycle where they just perpetually extract money out of you. And it puts those people down into a place that is very difficult or impossible to escape from, depending on their situations. And so that's kind of why, to me, it's just like, it'd be great to have a news episode. That's 100%. We went and we scoured the internet for only the newest computer parts, and there's not many out there right now, just to be clear. Like this is a normal lull and a launch cadence. But even if we could go do that, at some point you're just doing a disservice to, at least to myself and our team here, because we all kind of feel the same way. But I think also to the audience to just ignore these things because it's unpleasant to talk about and it's sad news and it's depressing, and but that's the reality. That's the reality we live in. And so anyway, I just mentioned that because I know it's there's some heavy topics and I get it, but that's what I think. So hopefully that's interesting. I don't know. If not, then I guess check out the Sega video. We have some really cool custom music in it. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more. Go to store.gamersnexus.net to support us and what we believe in directly, because we're going to do what we believe in here. And hopefully you're on board. But we do have other videos if not. So there's plenty of other channels too if you're really not on board with ever hearing about any of this. But this is, I got to talk about it. So you subscribe for more. We'll see you all next time.